Welcome back to the dirty tap water. It's been way too long, really way too long.
It's been over a month. We were last in John Paul's office. That was back in right before Easter. Easter Monday.
Yeah, and we still don't have a intro,
Mm-hmm.
and so this is our intro. And dirty tap water is exactly what it sounds like. We just hit record and open up with this question of, where should we begin? What's on your mind? So let's drop right in, man. What's happening?
What's happening? Oh man, that's a good question. Well, I'm in my office right now here in Covington. I drive here, 4 days a week, and this is where I see my clients. I know that wall. That's where we recorded last time, so that's where you see your client.
Yeah.
I'm kind of gearing up for my last day, and then because today's Friday, and tonight I fly to Oklahoma City because John and I are playing a show.
Yeah, dude.
In Oklahoma for this worship collective, Big Water Collective. Shout out to Scott McLean of Young Life. And then we also play some of our original stuff. So it's kind of the mojo I'm in. I got a little workout in this morning, which is nice. I'm sort of on this like hybrid training plan. And we talked yesterday and we sort of had a little bit of a catch up, which was really nice.
Yeah. Dude, I'm super interested. I would love to hear about this trip, about the songs. You sent me a couple of them, but I haven't gotten a chance to listen to them. Inspired by Psalms and just hearing about the collective too. It sounds like you were kind of mentioning. It sounds like there's just kind of like a feeling of a little bit of a spark on this trip. Some excitement, some new stuff.
Yeah, excuse me. It definitely is a little bit of a spark. I mean, John and I have been doing our original music for a while, and we got started though playing worship at Franciscan, and for me especially, it began with AMDG, and that was the household that we were in at Franciscan University, which stands for Ad Maiorum Dei Gloriam, all the greater glory to God. It sounds a lot nicer than it is. We were the household known for smoking cigarettes and doing bar ministry, which meant hanging out with the locals at the Cross Creek Tavern. So John and I got kind of started playing worship there in college. We played at that summer camp growing up, Camp Chassatonga. That's how we started playing music together. But so when we started doing original music, 3 or 4 years ago, more seriously, worship took a back burner. But this is kind of nice because it's coming back to that space where we started. But it's also with a guy who's just got a real heart for creativity, a real heart for letting kind of the Spirit do his thing, letting new things show up. And so I was super on the fence about it. This guy, Scott, approached me and John. And of course, I wanted to be a part of it to kind of play some of the stuff because I just really love the mission of Young Life. But when he started asking us to write songs, it took me a little bit to kind of jump into that space. And I wrote him one song and he really liked it. And so it just kind of snowballed. It seems like that's what happens for me is like, usually there's like an introduction to an idea or like, hey, let's try this thing, even with the podcast. And then I sort of feel some resistance to it, but I open up the door a little bit and then it snowballs. I've been sitting with the Psalms a little more and I've probably written like 3 or 4 songs. And that's been really good for me for reasons I don't really fully know why yet. But
Dude, tell me about your favorite song that you've written of like that batch. So
favorite song that I've written of that batch. Well, when they're in this stage, they don't really quite have names yet. So they're sort of like loosely. One of them is called Sing It to the Mountains. And I sort of wrote a verse. That's the other thing that's really cool about this whole project is that Scott is sort of like he's a sort of like a producer in the sense that he'll give you something and then you'll kind of send him a piece of your creative process and then he'll sort of nudge it in the right direction.
Oh, I love that, dude.
Something that I haven't always had success with, but I trust his artistic sense and also I just trust his like his heart where he wants things to go. And so yeah, and then he sent back a verse of the Psalms which was I forget which psalm it was, but I lift my eyes up to the mountains. Is that where you are? And that sort of turned into another verse and an outro chorus thing.
Yeah.
So
can you say what was that verse that you sent to him?
gosh, I
Can you
forget.
say?
I
Yeah.
honestly forget right now.
Yeah.
Let me see. So the chorus that I think was kind of inspired by him was, and this, I guess this is sort of psalm based, but it's then I kind of took it and took the second line to its own place. Though the mountains and hills be removed, my love is the rock that lives on in you. And so the idea kind of being, I look to the mountains, is that where you are? And maybe what I was sort of feeling in that moment was, I look to the mountains and maybe that's not where you are, right? Where are you? Like, are you in the mountains? Are you here? Are you just as much here as you are in the mountains? And so for me, that last line kind of being, yeah, even though the mountains, the hills, they're going to be gone one day, just like us. They're sort of impermanent to us in our lifespan, but one day they will be gone. And then that last line being, my love is the rock that lives on you. And sort of like first person, I guess, taking on the voice of God, if I may be so bold. But I really don't think about what these, lines are in the moment. What I really like about a new project of songwriting is that if it's new and I'm a little on the fence of it, it actually, I think, is the best case scenario for creativity, because I'm not attached to it. I don't have expectations for it. And so I'm sort of in that exploratory mode where I don't really know what's going to happen next. And that kind of happened for this one. And that's always a way better feeling than, I'm going to write a song about this or about that. So that one was my favorite.
Yeah, dude, I'm just feeling my heart just welling up with gratitude to be here right now. I just love this space, and I love bouncing ideas, and it's like just that saying that you said the other day of something like, allowing people to happen. And what you were saying speaks to a lot of the kind of themes in my life right now. It's like, are you in like the mountains and hills will go away, but like the rock is still there. And we were talking about yesterday just our gratitude for our faith, and how like half the time we're like, screw this, screw orthodoxy. Like, I've if I ever become a comedian, right, I've told you about this bit of like being on stage and being like, hello, God, is this thing working? Like, did I drop my signal? Like, where are you? Right? Because most of prayer for me is like not connection. Like most of prayer for me is sitting like, where are you?
Yeah.
But like spirituality and prayer like has always been a place to go. And what was speaking to me about like that rock of like and this idea like, everything's passing. Nothing stays the same. Everybody's gonna die. We're gonna die. This idea of mortality and finitude has been a huge pushing force in my life in the last like years. And my wife and I put an offer in on a house. I was just telling you yesterday, a big, beautiful house that needs a lot of work, but like a forever home. And we were walking around the house, and I believe, and I could be wrong about this, but I believe the woman died of cancer. And so we were walking through the house, and it was like the house hadn't been touched. And this was a while ago, that she had passed away or had been transferred to a like an assisted living facility. I think 5 or 6 years ago, something like that. But the house was left like there was like shirts folded on the bed, and like glasses like sitting out on the desk, and like it's just exactly like as it, like nothing's been
Whoa.
touched.
Whoa.
And it was so sad to me. For one thing, they didn't have any kids, and so like there was just this idea too. It's a beautiful, beautiful house, old house, but like I mean, it's like French style. It's old, but like the wall ornate wallpaper and like all this stuff, which we'll probably get rid of most of it and try to keep the kind of original character of the house. But it's just like stepping into a movie almost. But I mean, it needs a lot of work. Dude, I was upstairs and we were walking through the bedroom, and like there was like an office off the bedroom, and there was this book there, sitting on her desk, and it was like the secrets, the unknown secrets they don't want you to know, how to cure the top 50 diseases that cause death. And like that was
Whoa.
the book that was sitting there like on her desk with a little like magnifying glass, like a light magnifying glass on top
Gosh.
of it. And dude, it just made me, and it's making me now, like it just made me like well up with tears. And at just like how, like just thinking about this woman sitting at this desk, imagining that she just got this news of a terminal illness. And in the room around that too were like other medical books, and of course I'm speculating here, I'm like playing it out, but like I just like also like in that room, like I just felt like a lot of sadness and like of just like imagining like this woman sitting here at this desk, like, getting this news of a terminal illness and just like searching for the answer. And then, and I say this with care and reverence and respect as well, but like, but there's also a sadness of like, and like, for what? Like for more time? Like at like I was just struck too as like our family's growing and expanding, like my wife and I, expecting another baby and excited about that and all this stuff, and number two, and like as we're growing and expanding, and this thought is like, dude, I want this house for our kids. Like you and I, we grew up down the street from each other and pretty much grew up in the same home all my life. And there's just like, dude, there's something about sitting on our front porch, right? Like there's something about my friends knowing our front porch and like the memories that are there, and the idea of a place, and like that's what's captured my heart about this house, is like I could just see my kids running around the front yard and playing in the woods. And
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just really sobering realization that, like someday, whether sooner or later, mortality is going to come a knocking for me too, or for my loved ones. And so as you were saying that, like everything will change, but the rock will still be there. It's just that existential hit of like, dude, yeah, I really need something to be connected to that's something to be connected to that's more than more health. Not more than, but like more significant, connected to something that's different than more health, more money, more family, more like whatever, more time.
Wow. Yeah.
So as you were speaking about that song and that lyric, it just like brought me back to that moment. It really speaks to me.
That's a beautiful moment. And I'm glad you said that too, about how seeing, this woman had no kids. It's a decision that a lot of people make. And it's always, there's always more to the story, right? But I like,
100%.
I really
100%.
appreciate your honesty about how you received that in light of the fact that you're expecting your second. You've got your first. You've kind of grown up inside a family, from a very young age. And I think have had the richness of that kind of community. That really, struck me. And it is really sad, if the person's whole being was devoted towards making myself well. I'm not saying that that's what her being was, but right, that was kind of like the image that stuck out to you as you see those are the last things that were out, right?
Right.
And of course, who knows, maybe she died praying or died in the arms of her loved ones, and that's what really mattered to her, and you just came across the book. But either way, I really I guess I can hear your appreciation for relationship and also being connected to something bigger than yourself. I've been wrestling with this a lot lately, just because after that marathon, I'm in such a groove of waking up, and the first thing in the morning I do is work out. And lately I've just been feeling like just that little tug that says, maybe don't start with this, maybe back off of it being like the absolute priority. And part of the reason why I do it is that it wakes me up. And, it really sets me up well for my day. But I was just talking to our friend James Downs about this yesterday, about how it can be so tempting to, want to have fitness in running or strength training and to hold on to it. And part of that is what keeps me motivated, is like, I get excited about the progress that you're making. And I think that's all good, but there's something about the priority it sort of takes in my own life at times. And especially right now, I can feel how, despite it being one of the best ways to take care of my body, my body can be filled with a lot of the like chronic stress that comes from starting my day with exercise and then going, kind of setting the tone for that day is now let's go. Mm-hmm. And it sort of makes my priority of the rest of the day be on movement. Like, let's get stuff done. Yeah. And what I've felt in myself is like this slow movement away from what's the priority. And I got stopped in my tracks. I don't know where I encountered this in scripture. It might have been, somewhere in John's gospel where Christ says, I think he says it to the people who come to him after they were fed. They were some of the 5,000 who were fed. And he says, you come to me because I gave you food and now you're filled. But do not labor for the bread that perishes, but labor for the bread that lasts forever. Something to that effect. Yeah. And that's just been really, striking me, where it's like, it's great to run a sub 3 hour marathon. It's great to push your body. And I really do think that there was something about that moment where it was just totally right, because it was such so many things that came together. It was such a place of connection. But I don't want to be like an athlete, I don't want to devote myself to being I'm not going to spend now the next 10 years trying to reduce my marathon time by 20 minutes. Not that there's anything wrong with that. It's just, I feel that. I mean, that's what draws me, I think, to writing, to music, to this podcast, to therapy, that our, Dave Trufant always used to say, he was the owner of the summer camp that I grew up going to. He would say, as we were counselors, like right at the beginning of the staff meeting, is we're doing eternal work right now. Mm. Like, come be a part of this eternal work. And I was the fruit of that eternal work. Being someone who was a camper, being someone who was sort of taken in by the camp community. I mean, a huge part of who I am is as a result of being kind of made to feel confident in the outdoors by people who care about me, that just set me up for so much empowerment. It's truly like, so anyway, I really resonate with what you're saying. And I also just really appreciate your honesty, because I think it's our culture right now really subscribes to everybody can do their own thing, right? Like, everybody has their own choices for doing everything. And I have bitten a lot of that too. I'm kind of a fan of a lot of that, like
Yeah.
let everybody do their own thing. But I appreciate you taking that risk of saying like, yeah, it just kind of filled me with sadness knowing that maybe this person was, if they were just focusing on trying to get well. And on the other hand, it makes perfect sense why they would. I mean, I can't imagine.
I think that's part of it too. As I was saying that, like, I was thinking, I think the reason that speaks to me so much is because maybe as much as I want to deny it, or as much as I want to be a sage or a wisdom person that's, whatever, like, it's because like I can totally see myself just like wrecking myself at the desk. Like I can just see myself like just be like, dude, I'm gonna figure it out. And I think it might not be with something like death, but as you were talking about running, and you were like, that running that sub-3 marathon, it was really important because of where it pulled me to. It was a goal that pulled me through difficulties, and going through those difficulties has given me something now that I have and I can keep with me. But I don't need to keep the goal, and I don't need to that doesn't need to become my identity, and I don't need to obstruct other really important aspects of my living like in order to attain it. I think like that, dude, is exactly what has been happening for me with PhD. I mean, we talked about this yesterday, but it like I've wanted to get a PhD for my adult life so badly, and it's been like the one thing in my sights. And I was talking to my sister-in-law, Liz, and I just have like, she loves Richard Rohr. And so actually we were talking about the podcast, and she was like, oh yeah, does Mike know about Richard Rohr? I was like, Mike's the one that got me into him in the first place. She loves the Enneagram and all that, but I was sharing like some of, the shifts of my heart. She was talking about this, guy that she knows that got his PhD, but now is like struggling to find work. Got a PhD in psychology, but is struggling to find a teaching position. And she was like, and she said something like, and it's sad because there's a part of me that thinks that this guy just got his PhD to prove to everybody that he's smart and intelligent. And everybody already knew that. And that just like was an arrow to this part of me. That's just like, I just want to like, this part of me that feels so sad and little and insufficient and like so desperate for like respect and admiration from others, like that this part sees like getting a PhD as like, dude, people have to call you Dr. Dombrowski for the rest of your life. Like when you call someone, they'll take you seriously. Like,
it's pretty wild. It's kind of a trump card. Like,
right.
It's the ultimate status jump.
Yeah. And especially in like psychology, it's like, oh, you're a professional in understanding people, like, know, and I think I've come to the realization, a painful realization, that like you were kind of saying, I don't know if I want to train like this for the rest of my life. A couple Decembers ago, I think I've talked about this already, but I like talk about it a lot because it's something that I like never want to forget. And my wife, I was waking up at 3:30 in the morning to study for the GRE.
I remember that.
And then I would go to work around 8 or 9. I'd work till 6. I'd come home. I'd study some more. I'd go to sleep, and I'd like do it again. And I was just grinding. And my mentality was like, this is just a grind. It's just where I'm at. Like, I have to do this because this is like the noble pursuit. And so I was so burnt out. I was so stretched thin that, like Alyssa told me, she was pregnant. And my first thought was like, oh no. Right. Like my first thought was like, my interior experience was like, kind of like, oh, damn it. Like, shit. Like, that's just one more thing. And like here, this is really one of the most exciting, some of the most exciting news. And of course it comes with like an exit. Like there's also a part of it that's just like, holy shit, I'm gonna be like a dad, not an excitement of just like, I don't even know how to be an adult. Like we were talking about, like, I don't even know how the tax system works. Like I don't even like, and but like really this moment of just like I'm selling out on something that, well, I'm selling out, and I just like from that point on I was like, whoa, I need to really reprioritize. I had this perspective of that, like, well, I'll just grind it out and then things will be better later.
Mm-hmm.
And I really kind of made a commitment at that point of like, I don't ever want to work like that again. There may be a time that comes in life that like we're in dire straits and I need to, and I will show up for that 100%. But the situation wasn't calling for that. Like, and
Yeah,
what I
just really want to jump in here. It just strikes me that like that
yeah.
ambition can be used at the service of crisis when it comes.
Yeah, dude.
But
Yes.
maybe you don't need to be quite as ambitious forever, right?
Dude, that's perfect. That's exactly it.
Yeah, that hits home for me totally.
Yeah.
Ambitious parts that it's so hard to let go of because they've given you so much.
Yeah.
And
And it's like all I know.
yeah, it started so early. Richard Rohr has this line where he always says, "Where you start, how you start something is how you do everything."
Yeah, how
Right?
you
And
get there is where you'll arrive.
yeah, your trajectory is what you're doing. Like, so if you set out with, "I'm going to prove everybody how hard I can work," or "I'm going to prove to everybody how accomplished I am or how smart I am," that energy goes with you the whole journey. And so part of
Yeah.
it too is like, I'm just hitting scripture's hitting me right now, but seek ye first the kingdom of God and all the rest will be granted unto you,
Yeah.
right? Doesn't mean you can't work hard and get places, but imagine if you're doing it from such a different trajectory. But it is, for me, it's so hard to believe that you're not just going to lose the thing that you're letting go of, right? Partially because you might.
Right. And I mean, that's, I think the thing for me is like, yeah, dude, I am going to lose a PhD. Like, I'm not going to get one. But I'll like, I really believe this. I was struck. I think maybe I said it to you yesterday as well, that like the greatest contribution I can make to humanity is first and foremost being a great husband. And tied into that intimately is being a father who can show up for my kids, both materially and emotionally. Like, I don't think there's a real greater contribution I can make to the world than being a great dad. And yeah, I had this thought of like, I could throw myself into a PhD for the next 4 to 7 years and put everything on it. Or for the next 4 to 7 years, I could put everything into my family. I had that thought. I was like, dude, that's a like kick to the nads. Like, and it's like,
Yeah. It's so
right, if you
helpful, I
try
think,
it,
for us to think in terms of like, it sounds so dumb, but like opportunity costs. It's great. I mean,
yes,
if you could get a PhD and it would be no detriment to your family, which maybe you could do it and it wouldn't be a detriment. But when you
I
think
think it
about it,
could. Yeah.
and it could, but imagine you think about it as, but what would I be taking away from what it could be? Yeah, that's sobering. It makes you really want to dig deep. It makes me
Yeah.
really want to dig deep.
Yeah. I think I don't know if we've talked about it here, but this Time Management for Mortals course by Oliver Berkman, he wrote a book called 4,000 Weeks, which is 4,000 weeks. It's like a wall chart that you can get. Got one for my wife, although she hasn't hung it up yet. And I can understand why. Because it's like literally a box with 4,000 weeks and you just check one off each week. And so it's like
How
literally
many
this
years is
visual
4,000 weeks?
80 years, I believe.
Oh, wow.
Um,
That's like the average lifespan, I suppose.
yeah.
Wow.
And he said in one of the episodes on Waking Up, he said there's a story attributed to Warren Buffett of his pilot asking him, what are the top, or how do you achieve your goals in life? And Warren Buffett said, come up with a list of 25 goals that you want to achieve. Then rank order them from 1 to 0. He did that. He said, okay. He said, pick your top 5 and then avoid the other 20 like the plague. And so when I did that, I think I did talk about this here, so apologies for being redundant, but it's just so important to this whole story for me is that when I did that, I was talking to my wife about it. I was like, well, I don't need to put like being a good husband on there, being a good father. Like
That's what
it's
I
money
do.
in the bank.
It's just what you do until you don't.
Right. It's just money in the bank. Like, of course I'm going to put my family first. Of course I'm going to put my relationship with my wife first. So like, I don't even need to write it down there because it's such a priority. It's such a goal that is already happening. She just looked at me straight up. She was like, John Paul, if that's a goal, if that's actually one of your top 5 goals, then it should be one of your top 5 goals. And she just so gracefully calls me on my shit.
That woman sobers you up.
She sobers me up
in all the best ways.
In the best ways, dude. Yeah, in the best ways, man. Like splash of water to my face, like Mr. Gibbs in Pirates of the Caribbean, right?
I forget about Mr. Gibbs, but I got the cold water.
And so yeah, I put down my first was being a great husband, and my second was being a great dad. The third was to get a PhD. Fourth was to teach at university. Fifth was to create a body of zero cost to consumer psychological information. So I essentially want to create on YouTube, I just want to create a bachelor's in psychology. Like I want to record all the classes like they were a college class and just put them up for free. And it's there if anybody wants it. And so honestly, then since I've done that, which was probably like 8 months ago, all of a sudden now I'm actually, it's not that I don't think I could be a great dad and also get a PhD, because I actually think that I could, but I'm a limited person. And so to me now it's like, well, what's my actual priority? And I mean, it would be different if I didn't already have a master's in therapy, but I do. So I can already do like what I want more or less. I just want to get better at it. And so, I mean, it ties back into this idea that we're finite, we're limited, that experience of seeing that woman's book and just like facing the end of that finitude, that like it's going to come calling. And when it does, I hope that I'll look back and say, like, for the most part, my priorities were actually like written out, and whatever was on that list, people would look at it and be like, yeah, that's true. That's like how he orients himself.
That'd be kind of embarrassing if people went back to your journals and be like, man, his top 5, he didn't complete any of them.
Right. Exactly.
And you thought you did.
Yeah.
Man. Yeah, I remember you sending me that time management course. That seems like that's also been like healthy sobering as well. Because I know, how does this connect to your, I know you're big on waking up. I know you're big on, Sam, the meditation, from all the different teachers of, maybe not all of them, but a lot of the teachers of non-duality.
All of them.
How does this trimming away the fat connect to your practices, your spiritual practices?
Yeah. Dude, I think the spiritual practices are like the fuel cell of it. I mean, for one thing, like I am just trying my best to like surrender like it all. And
so like there's all those practices for surrender,
right?
But there's got to be a why, right? For me, it's like there's all those practices that sometimes I'm more inspired because they work so well. But then there's just the general like, oh my gosh, I want to surrender.
Yeah, and I see like, I don't think I could have this general sense of I want to surrender without beginning my day with meditation, where I'm just saying, today's not the time to think or figure things out. Like, meditation is an act of letting go of control and simply observing.
Mm.
And those practices, like, are, in my mind, they're like generic drills. And I don't know exactly what they're drills for, but I can imagine, like, in basketball, like a shooting drill. Like, I know what the drill is for, but I would run it a million times because I knew at some point I'm going to get the ball here and I'm going to do this move in the game, and hopefully I'll score a bucket if I know what I'm doing, right? If it's just automatic. And I see mindfulness as that, but like a more generic form that can kind of apply to anything.
Mm.
And so these, like, the practice of simply sitting and observing without judging, without reacting, it is what's totally underneath this. And so there's a really great distinction that I recently came across yesterday as I started a new meditation course between, and I think this relates to what you were saying about the mountains too. I almost jumped in to share it there. You were like saying, like, God, are you in the mountains? Or are you here? And the distinction that this guy, Stephen Bourdain, I think, Bourdain, made is between, in spiritual practices, there's a direct approach, there's a progressive approach. And this is kind of like the idea of, like, physical training. Like, we get a little bit better and then we experience more health, and then we get a little better and we experience more health, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm going to grow in virtue and then I'll receive the benefits of that virtue. So I'll enjoy my life more, and then I'll grow in virtue more, and then I'll be able to know God more or be more mindful or whatever it is. Like, I'm going to sit and I'm going to do my breathing so my body's more under control. And it's the idea that as I practice, I progressively improve towards the qualities that I want by intentionally cultivating them. And then there's the direct approach. And the direct approach operates on the idea that there's a saying, wherever you go, there you are. And I don't know what the hell that means, but it feels fitting here. The direct approach is the idea that, perhaps in the Catholic sphere, you don't need to change to be in relationship with God right now. Like, he's already here. He's not more here when you pray. Like, the direct approach is the idea that whatever we're looking for, we're actually already connected to it. We just need to learn how to be with it. And so the direct approach is more about doing less than doing more. It's the belief that the natural state of the mind is calm, equanimity, expansiveness, spaciousness, and that we don't actually need to do all these things to get there. We can just get there directly. Which I think you do need a little bit of both. But what's been shifting recently is that direct approach of this kind of idea of, like, I have so many ideas in my mind of I'll be happy when, like, I'll be happy if, like, I'll be happy then, right? When I get a PhD, when we have more kids, when we're more rich and, have more money, when I get a promotion, when I'm bigger, stronger, faster, more, right? But it's this constant, like, pushing life off until the conditions outside of me change so that I can experience this peace. And so one of the things about mindfulness is that every day I just try to practice, like, no matter what's going on in the outside, like, just sitting with what is now and allowing myself to step into that in that kind of more direct approach. And so in these moments when, like, I'm having these conversations or sitting these things, it's almost like, to explain, it almost feels like something shifts that I didn't see before. And I just have this inner sense of, like, that's the thing to let go of. And then it's kind of just like, all right. And the best, I think people ask a lot of times in therapy, like, well, how do you let go? And it's hard because you can't say, really. But I ask them, like, have you ever done a trust fall? And actually a lot of them say no. So then I say, go do a trust fall. But If you've ever done a trust fall, I think it's the best analogy for letting go, because like existentially, like that's what it feels like when I'm letting go, of just like a gut in my stomach and a pain, but also a freedom of falling. And so it's kind of like those daily practices help me to be more ready, so that when the things appear to let go of, I'm more prepared. And so, I mean, part of that time management for mortals course was essentially what he was talking about is, if we want to approach, it's more of a philosophy for time than anything. And he says, arguably, all life is time management. And I realized I'm a terrible time manager, and in order to use time well, first we have to accept the fact that we have a limited bit of it. And there's nothing that's going to change that. Like the idea that we can do more to get more done always fails, because not always, but typically fails, because there's just always going to be an end. And so it kind of just made me think like, dude, what am I? It helped reveal to me how much I'm waiting to live my life. And how much I'm trying to control my life to be the life that I want so I can live it, rather than just like being here with whatever it is, I guess. Yeah. I'm not sure, honestly, actually, to wrap all around it, I don't know how it all connects. I should have said this first. I don't know, but I do know that sitting and paying attention to my breath, sitting and just not doing anything, sitting and just observing my mind without judging and reacting, I really believe that has an intimate link to the things that are happening for me in the broader sphere. But I don't know.
Woof.
Yeah, man. Yeah. What's on your mind, man?
Just taking it in.
Yeah.
While you were talking, we the guys at my house have been doing Sunday evening prayer, and I join in with them occasionally. And I realized I caught myself. They were all saying like, all the saints to pray for us to kind of wrap it up, and I caught myself saying Ram Dass, and then they were just like, pray for us. And he's been coming to my mind lately. There's an amazing documentary on him. It's there's a few documentaries, but one in particular. What's it called? It's called it's the one about him who right after he had a stroke, and basically him dying. Right, it's like his last few years. Absolutely beautiful. And I guess part of the reason why I asked you, like, what is your why for? Because I heard you say I want to surrender. And I was curious, what is your why for surrender? And for me, in my inner world, there's always this kind of distinction between the practices that will get me into that place, and then sometimes the heartbeat of like, why do I want to do this so bad? And I don't know why there's that split there, but for me, the heartbeat always is like an inspiration of somebody that I see. When I see the fruit of someone who's surrendered, and I see how totally free they are, how totally loving they are, and how totally accepting of death they are at the end. Yeah. That's what then says, of course, I'm going to go back to the drawing board. Of course I'm going to. Because for me, sometimes, I don't know if you ever experienced this, meditation I can feel a little bit detached from the why. I think part of, as I'm saying this out loud, though, there's been seasons of my life where I haven't really needed a why to just drop into it. And I think part of it is that, as I'm reflecting, it's like stress levels have built up. Yeah. And when stress levels build up, I kind of come up here a little bit more. So that's probably why there's like a sense of needing a why connected to spiritual practice. But that being said, he's got this beautiful one-liner that he kind of came back to over and over during the course of his life. And he said, we're constantly trying to get rid of the prison of our neurosis, of our neurotic tendencies, our anxieties, our lusts, our pride. We're always trying to escape that in meditation. And for me, I no longer do that because for me, what is most true is that my present incarnation is the perfect vehicle to my liberation. Meaning like wherever I am right now, I just work with that, knowing that working with anything else isn't going to get me there. And gosh, I mean, that's such a beautiful worldview. I think that there's a little bit of truth to this. Like you said, the indirect gradual approach. I think Sam sometimes calls it the dualistic approach. And I think a lot of that sort of headspace where it's when you're focused on the mind, when you're focused on the breath, or when you're noticing thoughts, you're being mindful. And when you're lost in thoughts, you're not being mindful. And then you can sort of see this progress through practice. Whereas the non-dual approach is that you're always already there. You can kind of witness yourself to some degree lost in thoughts. There's something about that has kind of changed my perspective, I think, on rather than wanting to be totally liberated and totally at peace and totally like, equanimous, if that's the right way to say it, equanimous. Like maybe there's two parts of me. And one is I want to be able to see all of my inner world with clarity so that I don't get lost in it. Yeah. Right. Because I think that was a big part of my journey, was coming to realize, whoa, I have a lot of conditioning that, for example, maybe I feel shame over something. And when I can be mindful of it, I can realize that shame has nothing to do with the truth of my being. It's maybe more of like an attachment reason, right? I would feel ashamed of something because I want to be, maybe I learned early on that if I have no needs, people see me as very lovable, right? Or they see me as this person who has it all together, or they see me as someone who they can rely on. So then when I start to have needs like everybody else, maybe I feel ashamed, right? And meditation is sort of like taken away all the ammunition of that.
Yeah.
But what I found is where I feel the next step is for me now is, now that I'm aware that that's maybe not every feeling is totally accurate, or I can start to feel into emotions that feel more like conditioning rather than like, oh, I'm genuinely ashamed of what I've done. The call I feel now is actually now embrace all of that, right? Like almost like allow yourself to temporarily get lost. It's almost like the IFS thing of, if I'm always trying to remain unblended, it's actually not the self, right? It's a part of me that's trying to stay in control, and that seems like that's such an important thing to acknowledge, because it's such an important part of the journey, is creating enough space for not everything that comes up from your inner life to be taken totally seriously. But at a certain point, you have to then go back and feel it all. And
yes,
there's a certain sense in which I feel like that's sort of the call now, because I'll just give a little short story. I recently, just, this was maybe 6 months ago, I had an encounter with a loved one of mine where I definitely did something that I, wasn't super proud of. The way I treated this person was just not fair to them. And some of that shame came up, and I felt myself torn between the new compulsion was be aware of it, witness it, notice it. But it was like, rather than it be this liberating thing, it was starting to feel like, let me put this at an arm's length.
Yeah.
And that's a good thing, right? Thank God I learned how to put things at an arm's length and be like, oh, let me witness it all. But I had a moment where I said, let me just let this wash over me. I think I had just enough space to do it. And there was this feeling of like, whew, am I going to come back from this? Am I going too far, right? Am I going to get overwhelmed with these feelings that I learned to get all this safety from? And I found it to be so liberating to let it pass through me. And that's a very new experience for me with certain emotions. Like I've had, I feel like for me, I'm more capable of doing that with sadness. I'm more capable of doing that with certain anxieties and fears. But it was new. It was new as shame. And what really inspired me is, all these like talks from Ram Dass where he used to do psychedelics all the time to go deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And then he gave his teacher LSD in India, and it didn't do anything. Or something. he gave it to the Maharaji, and the guy was like, "Yes, it's good to do maybe once or twice, but you can get there all in here." And he was like, "Oh
Wow.
man, I got to give this up." And so he eventually got to the point where I think he says something like, once you get the message, you can lock the door, right? You don't need to keep the door flooded
Wow.
open. Once you get the message. And that's been sort of my experience of, once you can taste that feeling of liberation, where it's like, I am not the things that come before me. I am not the things that come and go. Well, I think William Blake says somewhere, anyone who has tasted the slightest bit of enlightenment will never forget it, no matter how much they devolve back into their old patterns. Because a lot of this has to do with the body. A lot of this has to do, I think, like I'm starting to understand how diet affects this awareness. Because for me, I feel like a lot of that awareness that was built through meditative practice has been desubtilized. The subtlety has been taken away through all the running training, because I'm taking in more food and I'm exerting more energy in my body. And I think the reason for that is that there's like this adage, energy goes where attention flows, right? And so if my attention's always on my body and on feeding my body and on pushing it and on training it, it can move away from the subtler aspects of awareness. And so that kind of ties back in with why, maybe I want to cut back on exercise a little bit. But more than that, there is this experience of, the goal is not to come back to this state of feeling good all the time or feeling at peace. The goal is can I have enough space within me to let the fullness of this experience come through me without hindering it, right? But also, sometimes you don't have enough space for that. And if you did let it through you, I would get reactive, right? I would get overwhelmed. I was fortunate that when this happened, I had I had an empty house, right? So I was able to just like feel emotions kind of passing through me. And I got to say, there's like an experience of resolution. It's like, okay, we felt that. And now we can kind of move forward. That's a huge part of therapy, but I really resonate with that kind of in parallels with that direct approach, which is the goal is not necessarily to increase the felt sense of calm all the time.
Yes.
It's, can we taste enough of it so that even in the storm, right? I was like filled with one of the most, in my opinion, one of the most painful emotions. And there wasn't like an emotion that I felt, but there was this small, faint flicker in the background that was still, you could say, like soft smiling, or still sort of like playful, and still a little bit like, we're doing it. Like there's this part of me that's excited. There was no emotion that represented that. I was totally filled with this shameful emotion. But so, yeah, I mean, that's been my journey. I'm so curious to hear how that connects to yours, how that connects to, moving from, because I know you used to meditate with Headspace, which I would kind of consider more that gradualist approach versus moving into some of the waking up.
Yeah, man. I'm thinking of spiritual bypass. I think it's something we brought up in the first episode. And what you're talking about of, using meditation, or it could be done with prayer too, to get away from the feelings so that you don't have to feel them. It's so helpful when we're not prepared to handle them. But there's a step beyond that. And it's having the security to feel it all. Eric Fromm said, the task is not to feel secure, but to be able to tolerate insecurity. And like,
yeah, that's it. That's it.
that's it. Like, and so, dude, I'm not, well, I have parts of me that are, right? And these are the parts of me that compulsively pull out my phone. But I don't find this fear of the present moment anymore. Or there's a deeper sense when I'm connected to this deeper sense that I'm not afraid of being in the present moment anymore. When am I afraid of being in the present moment? When I'm overworked, when I'm stressed, right? And so I think there's like a imbalance there. But I think part of what shifted for me in meditation was that early on, I didn't begin meditation because I thought it would be good for me. I started meditation because I was doing a research project, and everybody said, and we went to Mauritius, right off the coast of Madagascar, an amazing island. Shout out to Father Gregoire.
Shout out.
We'll have to talk about that trip and the stories at some point here.
Absolutely.
Oh man, yeah. Thinking about crashing the hotel and singing.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, singing what country roads, dancing with a bunch of locals at a resort that we didn't pay for. Yeah. I digress. But I was starting to do this project on mindfulness because I heard about it and I was interested. And I just kept reading over and over again. You shouldn't teach it unless you practice it. You shouldn't teach it. So I was just like, okay, I got to practice it. And so, but then there was a point at which I realized that I just believe that paying attention to the present moment is good in and of itself. Like, no matter what, like, it's not good because of what it brings about. It's good because it's good in and of itself. So I think pretty early on, my mindset towards meditation let go of the idea that I was doing it to feel better, which I think is the thing that gets a lot of people in the door, but also the thing that actually stops people from experiencing it deeper is the idea that it's going to help them. That is actually an obstruction, something that needs to be navigated, and a natural consequence of the progressive way. So no matter what, if you take the progressive approach, at some way it has to be let go of to some degree. But it's just I just made it like I just kind of made it. I just realized, dude, like, I don't think I can survive this life without it. Like, it's just something I need to do every day. And so I just kind of made it a part of my daily routine 5 days a week. I usually don't do it on the weekends because my weekends are usually hectic. Of like, when I wake up, I try to work out, although that's kind of more optional because it's harder. I meditate for some portion and I pray for some portion. And so I think partly I don't feel like I'm doing it to, like, I'm just doing it because I believe it's worth doing and not because of the effects that it brings. And so I think that, like, makes the journey a little bit easier because it I guess it's kind of like eating for me. I'm just like, I'm going to do it, because I have to, and I don't even know exactly how it works, but I'm going to do it every day. And so I think that kind of perspective helped. Like, I there really is the greatest enemy of meditation is the idea that it can be used for something. And unfortunately, that's what happens in the psychotherapy world. But anything to get people in the door. But maybe not anything. But yeah. But
yeah, well, that's the
what
danger too of something that doesn't have like a conceptual relationship to a person. It's a lot harder. I mean, you can still do it, but you're going to feel guilty for most people will feel guilty for using prayer, whereas
right,
it's a lot easier to do that with a technique.
Yeah. And I think the key is that you have to want it yourself. You can't do it because other people say it. At some point you have to choose it for yourself. And so I think for me, I just early on made that choice. But I was like really captivated as you were talking about this idea of kind of letting the emotion wash over you And that's something we've talked about. We talked about a little bit yesterday. Like, we're talking about how hard it is to even just let the emotion come up. How much harder still, like in relationships, it is for me. I had a student the other day in class. He asked me, like, kind of what does being a therapist mean for your relationship, like your relationship with your wife? Like, do you ever use kind of techniques to help her or something like that? And I was like,
I try,
dude.
And then she says, "Stop being a therapist."
Dude, I did. I mean, early on in our relationship, it was really hard for me, because I thought like I kind of had some insight that she needed, and that was all ego, you know. But dude, it's so hard. It's so scary to just cry in front of her and be like, I'm sad and I'm ashamed. Like, I kind of laughed when he asked this question of like, do you help your wife?
Bro, she helps
I'm
me.
like, right. I'm like, most of the time, my growth edge is being on the other side and receiving her love and care.
This is exactly the premise of the whole documentary with Ram Dass. He was writing a book called How Can I Help? And then he got hit by a stroke, and his speech mechanism slowed down. He had all these thoughts, but he couldn't say them, right? So he's known for just sitting there and captivating audiences for hours. And suddenly overnight, he speaks, a tenth of the rate. And it was like a dying to that part of him.
Wow.
But he said, I went inward. He says this all very slowly. It's like a stutter. And he says, and it's wonderful. And it's wonderful. And so he changed the name of his book from How Can I Help to How You Can Help Me. And so he spent the last years of his life totally dependent in a wheelchair. And people would still come and hear him lecture, but he would lecture maybe half as long, say a tenth of the words. Most of the lecture was him just laughing and smiling at people. And yeah, his whole focus switched to, how can you help me? I just think that struck me as this guy who I look to as, man, I want to live like him and I want to give like him. And where he landed was, I'm totally dependent.
Dude, that's awesome. And it just makes me think of like, that the saga of my PhD of like just this realization that like, I think so much of that is me becoming more of a therapist, more of an expert, and there's such a need. There's parts of me that need to be the guy. Like there's parts of me that just like the dream is to be the guy, whatever that is, like that guy.
I resonate. Hard.
And
it doesn't even just call me. I've got the answers.
Dude, I was even talking to my wife, right? I was like, what if we just named one of our sons, what if we just gave him the first name Doctor?
I liberate you.
He'd be Dr. Dombrowski.
He's like, Dad, you tried to liberate me from your neurosis. I don't need to be the guy. Your mom loved me.
Yeah. Dude, and that's one of the things I realized is like, if I don't want this burden to be on my kids, I need to let go of it. Like if I don't want my kids to live their lives trying to prove to their peers or to me or to someone else that they are smarter, I need to let go of it. And wow,
yeah. That's fuel. I mean, I feel that too. I don't even have a child or a child on the way, but that's fuel. Yeah, the work that you do now there's Carl Jung says that the unanswered questions of our parents become our questions.
Dude, and okay, so this was coming up to me earlier. That's awesome. There's a movie, I don't know what movie it is because I saw it on Instagram Reels. One of those times I was avoiding my stress and anxiety.
You're allowed some dissociation. Good part.
Yeah. It's a movie that Matthew McConaughey's in, and he says, there's a point in life where you realize that all we are as parents is the ghosts of our children's future.
Bro, he knows how to spew Zen koans like a Texan.
Dude, seriously. I mean, I heard that and it I feel like Peterson. I heard that and it just
flattened me.
In
no time flat.
0 seconds flat.
I had to go on a bloody SSRI just to recover from the gravity.
I took 14 years to even figure that out, man. I mean, Solzhenitsyn wasn't even saying that back in the day.
And he probably needed an SSRI too, man. He could have been very dark. Oh my gosh.
But like there, and I guess as we're talking here, I kind of am experiencing a sense that we were talking about how you have to have the progressive approach to be able to kind of fall into the direct approach a little bit. There's like a play of it.
Or you could just get slammed by the direct approach, but yeah, in general.
Yeah. But then I was talking about how like kind of mindfulness, which is this dualistic, which if anybody wants to get into meditation, I suggest that they start with mindfulness, do it for 2 years, every day for 10 minutes. But I think there's a way in which like a lot of this work has been kind of the preparation, like a lot of this last couple of years of putting this prep work into practice and now having kids, like I'm starting to see it like play out a lot. Like I'm starting to see that like, holy shit, Leah, I need this. Right? Like, dude, I don't want to give my kids my baggage. I know I will to a certain extent. But like they will give their kids my baggage. And their kids will give their kids some of my baggage. And their kids will give their kids some of my baggage. And right now, I have the ability to exponentially shift how much baggage is in the world by showing up for my priorities, by showing up and like humbling myself.
Wow.
And
see, that's a why right there.
That's a why. Yeah. There's another quote that I watch a lot of YouTube or Instagram shorts, but it's actually quite beautiful because there's a way in which the algorithm, like this is another time for another conversation, but algorithms become a part of your mind, right? That's just more thought, right? So that like once the algorithm picks up on your thought, if your thought is in a place of focusing, I think, on priorities, the algorithm puts the kind of same content. Whereas if you're just like scrolling through like people who are pole jumping the farthest, like that's what you're going to be thinking of. And that's when
I'm screwed because that'll get me.
I know, dude. I know. It'll get us both. But the other quote was, emotional pain travels through generations until somebody's willing to feel it.
So if any of my roommates hear me in my room just going, Grandpa, that sucked. They know what's going on. Also, the reason I chuckled earlier is because something ran through my head that was so dumb. My friends are always telling me I'm the king of nonsense, but it's because I have to constantly.
You are the king of nonsense.
Well, I have to constantly filter out, what this is doing all the time. But as you were talking about the baggage thing, I was like, man, we could make a little bumper sticker, which is parent
bumper sticker.
Parent like Delta, like you get a carry-on, just you don't get a checked bag. If you can just come with a carry-on, you've done your civil duty. Maybe even there's an airline out there where I think you only get like a what is it, a personal item. My goal is just to have a personal item of baggage for my kids.
Amen to that, brother. Like
part of it too is that I'm also learning to, like, as I have grace with my own parents, as I really face all of the ways that, they've hurt me, which I think is a part of the process. It can fill me with a lot of resentment, which I think was good to start feeling. But part of the way that I can actually have some grace with them is to honor the fact that the way that they've hurt me does also contribute to my own liberation, right? Like, there's something in the way that I was hurt that it's hard to be grateful for, but I can feel it. You know, I can feel the ways in which my ancestral line, you know, whatever you want to call it, has its own baggage, you know, burdens maybe of, you know, ambition or, like whatever is driving the intellectual pursuits, besides curiosity. I mean, I think part of that makes up who I am. And again, Jung has a quote where he says something like, to be totally devoid of opinion would make a person totally, you know, at rest in inner peace, right? Totally at rest with being, but it would take all of the color, flavor, and interest out of social life. If you Google any of that, it's not going to come up because I'm butchering it. But I think there's something to that, which is, there's a difference between like celebrating your baggage as an excuse and celebrating the present state of your brokenness as a pathway to vulnerability, right? It's like, I don't want to flaunt it as like, I'm just broken and so I get to hurt you. But, you know, when Mikey's just resting in nirvana, he's kind of a drag.
Dude. Yeah. Right. We were talking about this last night. Some people were talking about The Chosen and Jesus. And I was like, dude, Jesus, like, because this idea that like God is here, right? This direct approach that like, dude, God is here. He's like, he's right here. He's not up in a class. He's right here. But this idea of Jesus, like, how do you think he responded when he was hanging out with the tax collectors and the prostitutes, and you know, someone was like, "That's what she said."
Not in front of my heavenly Father.
Like, right? Like, Jesus couldn't have had to stick up his butt. Like, and somebody was telling me, I haven't seen The Chosen, but someone was telling me that like one of the things that they really like is that he's constantly telling the Sadducees and the people like, stop having to stick up your butt. Like, you know,
essentially.
and
I mean, that's what makes me feel like I'm on board. Like he was peaceful, but he wasn't afraid of confrontation. You know, he wasn't running from it. You can feel that in the show. It's powerful.
That's cool, man. But like, this is, I mean, it comes back to this question that we've asked way more than I ever thought we would, of like, what is the self? Right? Because there's and here's where we again venture outside of here's where we venture outside of our competence.
Oh my gosh. Maybe there's like very specific ads if we ever get sponsored one day for our listeners, which is like, are you plagued with existential dread, not knowing who you are? Are you unsure if who you are is just general awareness? Buy these Doritos to distract you from such things. Oh my gosh.
Escape your angst with pleasure.
I'm sold.
Oh man. But like, I just think there's something really here, and you see it in people who are really healthy, really holy. There's this wisdom and there's also this giddy playfulness. Like, there's something about there's a lot of fun there and thought, but about like, what's the self? But I was really, Mike, I was really struck more than anything. I actually think it's probably going to be something that's going to significantly affect the trajectory of my thought for the next 2 weeks. In what you said of like this idea of gratitude for baggage. And I mean, my sense is just maybe more than that particular idea. Like, what I'm really admiring is this just like an alternative towards resentment, which is just like a curiosity, a like openness, a like, okay, like, and because dude, and mom and dad, if you're listening, I'm sorry for being a dick.
Dude, you can never undo that.
like, and I'm not even like, yeah. I like, there's a part of me that wants to like drive to my parents right now and knock on the door and be like, I'm sorry for acting like a 14-year-old every time I come home.
By the way, I hate to say this right as you say that. I got 2 minutes before I have a client, but press on.
Dude, great. Dude, this is the dirty tap water, man.
We're doing it.
And I'm so glad to be here with you. Everybody listening at home in Russell Brand. But that's what we think. What do you think? Mikey, I'm so glad to be here with you, man. This is the dirty tap water.
Likewise.
And we're going to pick it up soon.
We're doing it. I'm glad we
Peace,
giggled
man.
a little bit more today. I love you, man.
I love you too. We're letting some room for the non-stick up our butts giggles.
But not too much.
Not too much of the room, because then more sticks would go up the butt.
I love you so much. Until next time,
Peace,
folks.
man.
Bye.
Until next time. Peace.
Bye.